Greatest Striker is a unique style football game that was released for the PlayStation 2 and published by Taito in 2001. This game is also known as Soccer America International Cup and International League Soccer, both in the US and in the EU regions also. And this is more of an arcade but yet somewhat simulation styled attempt at a soccer game that has quite a few different characteristics from the mainstream ISS Pro at the time, or PES, and the FIFA series. One of the most notable additions and features with this game is during the development of the game itself, there is a way for, at the time anyway, when it was released, that you could initiate certain control systems and elements through voice activation. So it was a relatively new concept at the time where you could utilise certain moves and you could tell players to pass the ball or even get the keeper to come out of the goal through telling them what to do through a microphone or a voice activation system, which at the time was definitely a new thing and was virtually unheard of. Only games later on, seeing like the likes of the SOCOM series later within the PlayStation 2's life cycle, managed to perfect that kind of concept. But it's interesting to see how these early adaptations of games were trying different ideas. And even saying that, even if you didn't have access to a microphone, you could still generally play the game through the use of a controller, and would play very similar to the likes of more iconic soccer games seen on the system and on other consoles as well. While it does have some simulation elements, the game really does focus a lot more even on the arcade side of gameplay, and it's often compared to the likes of the Sega Virtua Striker series in terms of its gameplay style, aesthetics, graphics, and pretty much all of the above. All of the patterns and gameplay mechanics are very reflective of that series of soccer games. You pretty much know it straight away just by looking at it. It is definitely the type of game that you would nearly have seen in an arcade back in the day, where you would have had to literally spend a lot of money just to play a few games, just to have a bit of fun. But generally, what's the game like to play overall? Right, it's not the most refined game that I've ever played. Like games likes of FIFA, and especially with the likes of the PES series, like I'm a big fan of the Pro Evolution Soccer series, and they would be the two series that I find are the most adaptable and easiest to play. Now, it's not to say that they're easy by any means, they're definitely not, but I find that they're the most refined in terms of their controls and the gameplay mechanics. They genuinely have a lot more flow and feel to the whole play style. You feel like you genuinely have a lot more control, and there's a lot more fluidity to the movement. They definitely done a lot more and put a lot more time and effort and love into the creation of all of those controls and dynamics with those type of games, and you could see it progressively get better through future generations on later consoles. But with regards to other companies diving into the football market, there is some nice titles and some cool ideas that were definitely showcased, but the control systems were definitely not as refined compared to the likes of primarily the FIFA and the PES series, and this game is definitely noticeable at that. Now, in terms of what it looks like and plays like from an arcade perspective, it does it really well. It's definitely an arcade style of football game, and it does that perfectly down to a T. But if you're looking for something that's more dynamic, more fluid, and more responsive, and that has more of a realistic feel, you would definitely be better opting in for the likes of the FIFA or the Pro Evolution Soccer games on the PS2, as they will definitely be more appealing to your whole play style and even your competitive nature. As these type of games, yes, they're fun to play, but that's really the whole aspect of them. They're competitive to a certain degree, but not on the same level as more iconic games. These are just more based for fun, if you're playing with your mates or if you're just happen to play it in the arcade, more to the point. But the one interesting thing with this is the fact is that they tried to use voice recognition in order to have some level of control over various dynamics in the game, which was definitely a cool idea to have at the time. But I still think that a lot of these things, because they were relatively new, they just wouldn't have been as fleshed out or as well thought out compared to more modern games. If that was done now today, there would definitely be a case for more interactivity, and it would be definitely better presented in all respects. But still, it's interesting to see back at that time that they were trying these ideas, even though they didn't come off as well, or be pulled off as well, compared to, like, say, other types of games also seen on the PS2. But still, it's an interesting concept all the same. But generally the game is fun to play. Like, I really like the graphics. I love the whole arcade style and visual preference that the game has on offer. It's very different and unique to its own style, and that's the cool thing. It definitely isn't like other games. It definitely has its own style, and regardless of the version you play, whether you play Greatest Striker, whether you play Soccer America or International League Soccer, they're all pretty much the same game. Like I have mentioned in previous videos, with a lot of these soccer games, when you look at the likes of the FIFA series, PES, and even with a lot of the Japanese iterations of, especially with the likes of the Pro Evo series, with the J League games for instance in Japan, technically they were the exact same games, only just rebranded or rebadged. They might have maybe different players in different leagues or different clubs at the time, with a few slight tweaks and feature updates. But technically they're the exact same games through and through. And if you've played one, you pretty much have played them all. Now, it's not to say that they're bad games outright, but if you've got one, you don't need the other, because they all play really the exact same. The only major differences would be depending on your region that you're playing in. If you were playing the likes of in Japan or in North America, you'd be able to play at 60 frames per second or 60 Hz, and the games generally would have run a lot faster compared to the European region, where we only had access to play at 50 Hz, so generally would have been a bit slower. But it just really boils down to your own preferences. There's some people that enjoy that type of thing, other people aren't too bothered either way. Myself personally, I wouldn't have been too bothered regardless. If I got to play a game, it wouldn't have mattered so much, as long as it wasn't too slow to the point that you felt like it was boring. You would have got some enjoyment out of it. But generally with soccer games, that was never really a case or an issue as such. But it is what it is. They're a fun series of games, regardless of the version that you play. But again, if you have played one, or if you own one, you don't need to go out and buy the other iterations. Not unless you're adding them to your collection. Like if you're building up a massive games library, then you can have all of the iterations of the game from different regions, just to stock up your shelf basically. But other than that, if that's not really your thing, all you need is one copy of the game, and that's pretty much you good to go. But it is interesting to see other types of games that were released at the time, and they are worthwhile trying in their own right, especially if you're looking for something a little bit different that moves away from the more serious nature of the likes of the PES and FIFA games that were seen on the system. And I'd love to know your thoughts on Greatest Striker, or even any of the other iterations of the game that you might have played on the PlayStation 2. And if so, what do you think of the games? Do you generally enjoy these type of arcade style soccer games, or maybe not so much? I'd love to hear whatever stories you do have of these type of games, so be sure to share them down in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be updated of future videos. And in the meantime, if you would like to see more types of soccer games similar to Greatest Striker and other types of soccer games released on the PS2, you can check out the playlist here on screen to see more of those games in action. And I will see you all in the next one.